The doorbell rang just as I set the carving knife on the china we use once a year. My mother hissed about ruining dinner, but my stepfather froze. The homeless man outside did not beg for money. He simply asked if I still folded napkins the same way, then slipped my company's access card into my hand. I realized this was not charity. It was an old debt returning, and letting him in meant starting the biggest revenge of my life. My name is Chloe Gonzalez and I am 29 years old. I was standing in my mother's kitchen in Marston Ridge, Colorado, staring at a turkey that looked like it had been varnished for a magazine cover. The house smelled of sage, roasted fat, and aggressive perfectionism. It was 4 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving, and I was already exhausted. My mother, Dana Hart, was currently vibrating with a frequency of anxiety that could probably shatter glass. She adjusted the centerpiece of dried gourds and autumn leaves for the 5th time in 10 minutes. She wanted everything to be perfect. No, that is not quite right. She wanted everything to look perfect. There is a difference. In this house, appearances were the only currency that mattered. Graham Vale, my stepfather, sat in the living room. He was not helping. He never helped. He monitored. Graham was a man who occupied space with the heavy silent authority of a bank vault door. He was a senior executive at a major financial firm, and he brought that energy home every single night. He did not need to raise his voice to control the temperature of a room. He just had to exist in it. I placed the carving knife down on the china platter. This was the good china, the stuff we were only allowed to use once a year. The rest of the time it sat behind glass in the cabinet, gathering dust and judgment. Mom snapped her fingers at me. "Chloe." "The napkins," she said. Her voice was tight. "Are you doing the fan fold or the bishop's hat?" Graham prefers the bishop's hat. It looks more dignified. I looked at the linen napkin in my hand. I wanted to tell her that Graham probably did not care about napkin architecture, but I knew that was a lie. Graham noticed everything. He noticed if the blinds were drawn unevenly. He noticed if I gained 3 pounds. He noticed if the world did not bend exactly to his specifications. "I am doing the fan, Mom." I said. "It is festive." Mom sighed. It was a tragic sound, as if I had just announced I was joining a circus. "Fine. Just make sure the edges are crisp." "Low. Get off your phone and put on a tie." My younger brother, Low, was draped over the sofa like a discarded coat. He was 17 and currently operating on a delay of about 5 seconds for any incoming audio. He did not look up from his screen. "I am texting Grandma." Leo lied. He was definitely playing a game. Graham turned a page of his newspaper. The sound was sharp in the quiet room. "Low. Listen to your mother," he said without looking up. Leo sat up instantly. He scrambled off the sofa and headed for the stairs. That was the Graham effect. I went back to the napkins. 1 fold, 2 folds, press the crease. It was a rhythm I could lose myself in. I needed to lose myself. My job at Kestrel Ridge Capital had become a nightmare over the last 6 months. A slow-motion car crash of passive-aggressive emails and vanishing responsibilities. I was a risk control specialist, but lately I felt more like a risk myself, a liability to be managed. And then the doorbell rang. It was a jarring sound. It cut right through the smell of turkey and the tension. Mom froze. "Who is that?" "We are not expecting anyone. It is Thanksgiving. People should be with their families." I wiped my hands on a towel. "Maybe it is a delivery," I said. "I will get it," Graham said. He stood up. He smoothed the front of his cashmere sweater. He moved with the slow, deliberate confidence of a man who owned the ground he walked on. I followed him into the foyer, mostly because I wanted to escape the kitchen and Mom's critical eye for napkin creases. Leo hovered at the top of the stairs, tie half tied, watching. Graham opened the front door. The air that rushed in was biting cold. It carried the scent of snow and pine needles. And standing on the porch was a man who looked like he had walked through a hurricane to get here. He was older, maybe late 50s or early 60s, though it was hard to tell. He wore a heavy wool coat that had once been expensive, but was now matted and stained with oil. His shoes were split at the seams, revealing gray wool socks underneath. His beard was a thicket of gray and white, unkempt, but not wild. He was shivering. It was subtle. A vibration in his frame that he was trying to suppress. Graham did not recoil. He did not slam the door. He just stood there blocking the entrance with his broad shoulders. "Can I help you?" Graham asked. His tone was polite, distant. The voice you use for a telemarketer you're about to hang up on. The man looked up. His eyes were startlingly clear. They were not the glazed eyes of an addict or the frantic eyes of the mentally unstable. They were sharp, intelligent, and incredibly tired. "I apologize for the intrusion," the man said. His voice was raspy, like dry leaves scraping over pavement. "I smelled the food. I have not eaten in 2 days. I am not asking for money. I just wondered if you had any scraps. Anything at all." Mom appeared behind me. She gasped. A sound of pure, unfiltered social horror. "Graham, close the door." She whispered loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "He could be dangerous. You do not know who he is. We have children in the house. I am 29. Mom," I muttered. Graham ignored her. He looked the man up and down. He was assessing him, calculating the risk. I stepped forward. The cold air felt good against my flushed face. "Wait," I said. "We have plenty of food. Way too much turkey. I can make him a plate to go." It was the logical solution. The charitable solution. It kept the scary reality of the world on the porch, and kept our perfect warm bubble intact. Graham turned his head slightly. He looked at me. It was a look of mild disappointment, as if I had failed a test I did not know I was taking. "On Thanksgiving," Graham said smoothly, "we do not turn people away on Thanksgiving. Chloe, that is not who we are." He turned back to the man and stepped aside. The gesture was grand, theatrical. "Come in," Graham said. "Join us." Mom looked like she was going to faint. "Graham," she hissed. "It is fine. Dana," Graham said. His voice dropping to that final absolute register. "Set another place at the table." The man hesitated. He looked at Graham, then at Mom, and finally at me. He did not look grateful. That was what struck me. Most people in his position would be bowing and scraping, overflowing with thank you. This man just nodded. A single sharp dip of his chin. "Thank you," he said. He stepped over the threshold. The smell hit me then. It was the smell of damp wool, old sweat, and wood smoke. It clashed violently with the aroma of the roasting turkey. He brought the outside world into our sanctuary, and it felt like a violation. "Let me take your coat," I said automatically. He shook his head. "I will keep it on if you do not mind. I am still cold." "Of course," I said. He walked into the living room. He did not wait to be guided. He moved to the center of the room and looked around. He did not look like a guest marveling at the architecture. He looked like an inspector. He looked at the fireplace. He looked at the high vate ceilings. He looked at the family photos arranged on the mantel. It was eerie. He moved as if he knew exactly where the furniture would be. He did not bump into the ottoman. He skirted the edge of the rug where it always curled up. Mom was in the kitchen furiously whispering to Graham. I could hear snippets of it. "Insane. Dirty. Disease. Why would you do this?" I stayed in the living room with the stranger. "I am Chloe," I said. He turned to me. He studied my face. It was an intense scrutiny, like he was trying to find a pattern in chaos. I know, he said. My stomach did a small cold flip. You know. You look like the pictures, he said quickly. He gestured vaguely toward the mantel. Right. Thor. He held out a hand. His skin was rough, chapped red from the wind. His fingernails were dirty, but trimmed short. I noticed something. Then, on his left wrist, there was a strip of paler skin, a tan line. It was the distinct shape of a heavy, expensive watch. A Rolex or a Breitling, the kind of watch Graham wore. And on his right ring finger, he wore a gold band. It was scratched and battered, but it was solid gold. I looked closer as he lowered his hand. There were initials engraved on it, but they were worn down to almost nothing. I thought I saw an S. Maybe an M. I should wash up, he said. Before I sit down. The guest bathroom is just down the hall on the left, I said. I know, he said again. He stopped. He seemed to catch himself. Standard layout. He added. Most of these houses in Marston Ridge are the same. He walked past me toward the hallway. As he passed, he stumbled slightly. He was weak. I reached out to steady him, grabbing his arm. Careful, I said. He gripped my forearm. His grip was surprisingly strong. For a second, we were locked there. Close enough that I could see the gray stubble on his cheeks and the broken capillaries in his nose. He leaned in. The smell of wood smoke was overpowering. Chloe, he whispered. He did not say it like a question. He did not say it like a greeting. He said it like an anchor. He said it with a familiarity that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Do you still fold the napkins like that? He asked. I froze. What? He let go of my arm. But as his hand slid away, I felt something hard and plastic press against my palm. He guided my hand toward the pocket of my cardigan. Take it, he breathed. It happened so fast. 1 second he was holding my arm. The next he was moving down the hall toward the bathroom, his heavy boots thewing against the hardwood floor. I stood there stunned. I looked toward the kitchen. Mom and Graham were still arguing in hushed tones. Leah was coming down the stairs, staring at the stranger's back with wide eyes. I shoved my hand into my pocket, my fingers curled around a small rectangular object. I pulled it out, shielding it with my body so no one else could see. It was a white plastic card. A key card. I stared at it. The logo printed in blue and silver on the front was unmistakable. It was a stylized hawk in flight. Kestrel Ridge Capital. My blood ran cold. This was my company. This was the firm where I had spent the last 5 years of my life. The firm where Graham was a member of the board. I turned the card over. It was not a standard employee badge. It did not have a photo. It was a high access key. The kind used for secure server rooms and executive suite. The kind of card that did not just open doors. It opened archives. It was old. The plastic was yellowed at the edges, but the magnetic strip looked intact. Why did a homeless man have a corporate access card for a billion-dollar financial firm? I looked down the hall. The bathroom door clicked shut. I heard Graham's footsteps approaching. I shoved the card back deep into my pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs. Chloe, Graham asked. His voice was right behind me. I jumped. I turned around, forcing a smile onto my face. Felt brittle. Like it might crack and fall off. Yes, I said. Is our guest comfortable? Graham asked. He was watching me. His eyes were dark. Unreadable. He looked at my hand. The one that was still buried in my pocket. He went to wash up, I said. Good, Graham said. He stepped closer. He was too close. He smelled of expensive cologne and scotch. You look pale. Chloe. He said softly, "Is something wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "Just hungry." Graham smiled. It did not reach his eyes. "Let us eat." Then he said, "We do not want the turkey to get cold." He turned and walked toward the dining room. I watched him go. I felt the sharp edge of the key card digging into my hip through the fabric of my pocket. A homeless man had just walked into our house. He knew my name. He knew the layout of the hallway. And he had just handed me a key to the place that paid my salary. This was not a random act of charity. This was a delivery. I looked at the bathroom door again. I had no idea who that man really was. But as I walked into the dining room to take my seat, I knew one thing for certain. If I kept quiet, I was safe. If I asked questions, I was in danger. And looking at the back of Graham's neck as he took his seat at the head of the table, looking like a king on his throne, I realized something else. I was absolutely going to ask questions. Graham looked up as I sat down. His gaze drilled into me. It was a look of pure predatory warning. Said without words, "Do not ruin this night." But looking at the empty chair where the stranger would sit, I knew the night was already ruined. The only question now was how much damage we were all going to take before dessert. I sat at the dining table and watched the steam rise from the green bean casserole. It was perfectly arranged, topped with those crispy fried onions that come in a can, the kind my mother insisted on buying because they represented a specific brand of domestic stability. To anyone looking through the window, we were the American dream personified. A handsome stepfather at the head of the table, a devoted mother fluttering about, a teenage son, and a professional daughter, all about to share a meal with a less fortunate soul. But I knew better. I knew that the porcelain was cold to the touch. I knew that the conversation was going to be a minefield. And I knew that I hated family dinners. I hate them because they require a suspension of disbelief that I can no longer muster. I work in risk management. My entire career is built on the premise that people lie, that systems fail, and that if you look at a set of numbers long enough, they will eventually confess their sins. I am a data risk control specialist at Kestrel Ridge Capital. It sounds impressive at cocktail parties, but in reality, it means I am the person everyone in the office avoids making eye contact with near the coffee machine. I am not a girl with a heart of gold. I am not the heroine in a Hallmark movie who saves the family business with pluck and optimism. I am tired. I am 29 years old and I feel like I have been fighting a war of attrition for the last 5 years. Kestrel Ridge Capital is a shark tank wrapped in expensive glass and polished steel. It is the kind of place that talks loudly about corporate responsibility and diversity initiatives, while quietly purging anyone who asks the wrong questions. I learned this the hard way. 6 months ago, I was reviewing a quarterly audit for the mid-cap investment division. It was routine work. Dull work. The kind of work you do with a podcast playing in one ear. But then I saw it. A series of transaction logs that did not sync up with the server timestamps. It was a discrepancy of milliseconds. Something most people would write off as a glitch. But I do not believe in glitches. I dug deeper. I found that the metadata on those files had been scrubbed. Someone had gone in, altered the trade execution times, and then tried to cover their tracks. I did what I was supposed to do. I flagged it. I wrote a report. I sent it to my direct supervisor, a man named Marcus, who wore suits that cost more than my car and smiled with too many teeth. 2 days later, I was called into his office. He did not talk about the data. He talked about my stress levels. He asked if I was sleeping well. He suggested that perhaps I was overworking myself, that I was seeing patterns where there was only static. He called it paranoia. He called it burnout. And then with a smile that never reached his eyes, he removed me from the project. Since then, I have been a ghost in my own office. I was moved to a desk near the printer, away from the windows. My login credentials for the higher tier servers were revoked without explanation. And just yesterday, right before I left for the holiday weekend, I received an email. It was flagged as high priority. Subject departmental restructuring and compliance review. My name was on the attached list. It was under a column titled Positions Under Review. It was a soft threat. A polite way of saying that after the holidays, I should probably start updating my resume. They were squeezing me out. They wanted me to quit so they would not have to pay severance. I looked up from my plate and saw Graham watching me. He was smiling. But his eyes were flat. He knew. I did not know how he knew. But Graham Vale always knew when a weakness had presented itself. He sat at the head of the table like a monarch. His silver hair perfectly coiffed. His hands resting on the tablecloth. Graham was the reason my mother felt safe. She had married him 10 years ago. 3 years after my father died of a heart attack that left us with nothing but debt. Dana Hart was a woman who was terrified of the cold. She needed a furnace. And Graham was a blast furnace of wealth and security. She traded her voice for his protection. She kept the house clean. She folded the napkins. And she looked the other way when his temper flared. Or when he made business calls behind closed doors that sounded more like threats than negotiations. She did not want to know the truth. She wanted the image. And right now the image was being threatened by the man sitting across from me. The stranger. Silas had returned from the bathroom. He looked slightly better. He had washed his face and combed his fingers through his beard. He had taken off the heavy coat, revealing a flannel shirt that was worn thin at the elbows. He sat down in the empty chair with a slow, painful stiffness. "Thank you," Silas said. His voice was still raspy. Mom forced a smile. It was tight and brittle. "Well," she said. "We are just glad to have you. We were just about to start." Graham cleared his throat. It was a sound that demanded absolute silence. "In this house," Graham said, his voice deep and resonant, "we have a tradition. Before we eat, we say what we are thankful for. It keeps us grounded." He looked at the stranger. He was challenging him. He was daring this man, this intruder, to participate in our charade. "I will start," Graham said. He picked up his wine glass. The crystal caught the light from the chandelier. "I am thankful for order," Graham said. He looked directly at me. "In a chaotic world, order is the only thing that separates civilization from savagery. I am thankful that I have the strength to provide this home, and the means to protect it." He took a sip of wine. It was a power move. He was not thanking God. He was thanking himself. Mom went next. Her voice fluttered. "I am thankful for my family, for having everyone together, for peace." She looked at the stranger nervously, as if expecting him to jump on the table and shatter the peace she cherished so much. Leo mumbled something about being thankful for his new gaming console, keeping his eyes on his plate. Then it was my turn. I felt the plastic card in my pocket. It was digging into my thigh. I gripped it under the table, my thumb running over the raised letters of the logo. Kestrel Ridge Capital. "I'm thankful," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a bomb disposal technician, "for the truth. Even when it is ugly, even when it is inconvenient, because eventually the truth is the only thing that lasts." Graham's jaw tightened just a fraction of an inch, but I saw it. "And now you, Mr. Mercer," Graham said, turning his gaze to the homeless man. "What does a man in your position find to be thankful for?" It was cruel. It was meant to humiliate him, to remind him that he was eating our food, sitting at our table, existing on our charity. Silas placed his hands on the table. I looked at his fingers again. The ring. The heavy knuckles. He did not look down. He did not look ashamed. He looked straight at Graham. "I am thankful that I am still visible," Silas said quietly. The room went silent. The clink of a fork against a plate would have sounded like a gunshot. "Most people think the worst part of being on the street is the cold," Silas continued. He spoke slowly, measuring every word or the hunger. And the hunger is bad. It gnaws at you until you cannot think. But that is not the worst part. The worst part is the ghosting. He looked at my mother. She blinked, surprised to be included. You walk down the street, Silas said. And people do not just ignore you. They look right through you. Their eyes slide over you like you are a flaw in the pavement. You cease to be a person. You become an obstacle, a statistic, a cautionary tale. You scream and no one hears. You bleed and no one sees. You are erased while you are still breathing. He paused. He took a breath that rattled in his chest. So I am thankful, he said, turning his eyes back to Graham, that tonight I am seen. I am thankful that I'm sitting at a table where people know I exist, where they cannot pretend I am just a ghost. Because ghosts cannot talk. Ghosts cannot eat. And ghosts certainly cannot collect on debts. My mother let out a small trembling breath. Oh, she whispered. She looked at Silas with sudden genuine pity. For a second, the socialite mask slipped, and I saw the woman she used to be before the fear took over. But Graham did not look pitiful. Graham looked at Silas the way a shark looks at a seal that has wandered into deep water. It was not fear. It was recognition. It was the look of a man who is mentally opening a filing cabinet, dusting off an old dossier, and calculating the liability. He knows him, I thought. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Graham did not just invite a homeless man in to prove a point. He invited him in to assess the threat level. I watched the dynamic shift. Silas was not eating. He was leaning back. His posture relaxed despite his ragged clothes. He was holding Graham's gaze. There was no subservience in his eyes. There was a challenge. It was the look of a man who has nothing left to lose, staring at a man who has everything to lose. Graham picked up his knife and fork. The metal scraped against the china. A harsh grating sound. Well, Graham said. That was very poetic. But let us not let the food spoil. Chloe. Pass the potatoes. He dismissed Silas's humanity with a request for carbohydrates. It was classic Graham. If you cannot control it, minimize it. If you cannot minimize it, ignore it until it goes away. I picked up the heavy bowl of mashed potatoes. My hands were shaking slightly. I passed them to Graham. As I did, I glanced at Silas. He was looking at me. He gave a microscopic nod. It was barely visible. Just a dip of the chin. I gave you the key. The look said, now you have to decide if you are going to use it. I reached into my pocket again. The card felt hot against my palm. If this man was just a random drifter, how did he have a level 4 security pass to Kestrel Ridge? And not just any pass. An old one. The kind they used 5 or 6 years ago before they switched to the biometric chips. I thought about the email I had received, the restructuring, the feeling that I was being erased at work. And then I looked at Silas, a man who had been literally erased from society. Was there a connection? Graham was spooning potatoes onto his plate. He looked calm. Too calm. But I saw the tension in his neck. A small vein was throbbing just above his collar. He was terrified. The question was, what was he terrified of? And more importantly, this was a trap. Who was setting it? Was Silas trapping Graham? Or had Graham lured Silas in to silence him? I looked at the turkey. It suddenly looked less like a festive meal and more like a carcass. I am not hungry, I said. Eat, Graham commanded. He did not look up. We are a family. We eat together. Picked up my fork. I stabbed a green bean. I will eat. Thought, but I'm not swallowing your lies anymore. The dinner conversation resumed, halting and awkward. Mom asked Silas where he was from. He gave vague answers here and there around. I used to work in finance a lifetime ago. That made Graham freeze with a fork halfway to his mouth. Finance? Mom asked, trying to be polite. Oh, Graham works in finance. Maybe you know some of the same people. Silas smiled. It was a wolfish smile behind the gray beard. I am sure we do. Silas said the world is a very small place. Mrs. Oh, especially when you get to the top. The air gets thin. Everyone knows everyone else's breathing patterns. Graham dropped his fork. It clattered onto his plate. Clumsy of me. Graham muttered. He reached for his wine glass and drained it in one swallow. I watched them. The two men. The king and the pauper. The executive and the exile. And sitting there, gripping the plastic keycard, I realized that the distance between them was not measured in money. It was measured in secrets. And I was sitting right in the middle of the crossfire. I needed to know what was on that card. I needed to know what Silas knew. And I needed to know why my stepfather, a man who could freeze a boardroom with a glance, was currently sweating through his $3,000 cashmere sweater. I took a bite of turkey. Tasted like ash. But I chewed and swallowed. I needed my strength. Because Thanksgiving was over. The investigation had just begun. The silence in the dining room was heavy. A physical weight that pressed down on our chests. The only sound was the scrape of silver forks against fine china. A polite friction that grated on my nerves. My mother, desperate to fill the void, cleared her throat. It was a nervous fluttering sound. So, Mr. Mercer, she said. Her voice pitched a little too high. A little too bright. You mentioned you used to work in finance. That is fascinating. What exactly did you do? Silas looked up from his plate. He had been eating methodically, not with the ravenous haste of a starving man, but with the focused precision of someone who knows the value of fuel. He wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, the fanfold I had spent 20 minutes perfecting, and placed it gently on the table. I worked in education. Mostly, Silas said. His voice was calm, contrasting sharply with his ragged appearance. Financial literacy for underserved communities, helping people understand how the systems above them were designed to keep them exactly where they were. It was a vague answer. It was the kind of answer you give at a cocktail party when you do not want to talk about your job. But there was an edge to it, a sharpness that suggested the curriculum he taught was not about balancing checkbooks. That sounds very noble, Mom said, latching on to the word education like a lifeline. Doesn't it? Graham helping the community. Graham did not answer immediately. He was gripping his water glass. His knuckles were white. I watched his hand. Graham had hands that were usually manicured and relaxed. The hands of a man who signed checks and shook other expensive hands. Now they looked like claws. He was squeezing the crystal stem so hard I thought it might snap. Noble, Graham said finally. The word sounded like he was spitting out a piece of gristle. It is certainly one word for it. Though I have found that those who claim to help the community often end up helping themselves to the community's resources. Silas smiled. It was a cold, humorless expression that barely moved his beard. An interesting perspective, Mr. Oh, Silas said. Especially coming from a man in your position. I suppose when you look down from a certain height, everything looks like a resource to be harvested. Even people. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. My brother. Low. Stop chewing. He looked back and forth between Graham and Silas, sensing the violence in the air. Even if he did not understand the language, I needed to know. The plastic key card in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I needed to push. You seem to know a lot about us, Silas, I said. I kept my voice steady, channeling the professional detachment I used when auditing a non-compliant department. And you have things in your possession that suggest you were not always in education. I saw Graham's head snap toward me. His eyes widened. He knew. He knew I had seen something. Silas turned to me. His eyes softened slightly, but the intensity remained. We accumulate things. Chloe, he said softly. Life leaves debris in our pockets. Sometimes it is trash. Sometimes it is a key to a door we thought was locked forever. Where did you get it? I asked. I did not specify what it was. I did not have to. Silas leaned forward. He rested his elbows on the table, violating one of my mother's cardinal rules of etiquette. But nobody dared correct him. You are asking the wrong person, he said. His voice dropped, becoming an intimate whisper that carried across the table like a shout. If you want to know about keys and doors, and who holds the locks, oh, you sitting at the head of the table. I looked at Graham. He was pale. A sheen of sweat had appeared on his upper lip. Graham, I said. Enough, Graham barked. He slammed his hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. This is Thanksgiving, Graham announced, his voice trembling with a rage that felt disproportionate to the situation. We are not going to interrogate a guest. We are going to eat. We are going to be grateful, and we are going to stop asking questions that do not concern us. It was not a request. It was an order. It was the voice of the executive who fires people before lunch and forgets their names by dinner. But the silence that followed was not obedient. It was terrified. And then a sound broke the stillness. It was a phone. Graham's phone. It was sitting face up on the table next to his wine glass. The screen lit up, cutting through the dim ambient lighting. I looked at it. The caller ID did not show a name. It just said unknown number. Graham stared at the phone like it was a bomb. He did not reach for it immediately. He hesitated. For a man who lived attached to his device, who took calls during funerals and weddings, his hesitation was screaming a confession. Aren't you going to get that? I asked. It might be work. Graham snatched the phone. He did not answer it. He stabbed the side button, silencing the call, and then flipped the phone face down. Spam, he muttered. Just spam. I looked at Silas. He was watching the phone with a knowing look. They're calling to check, Silas said. Graham looked up. Check what, to see if the alarm has been triggered yet, Silas said. Or maybe they are calling to tell you that a ghost has been spotted on the security cameras in the archive sector. Systems are funny like that, Graham. They have a memory even when you try to wipe them. Graham stood up. His chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor, a harsh screeching sound that made my teeth ache. Get out, Graham said. He pointed a trembling finger at the door. I tried to be charitable. I tried to be a good Christian. But you are insane. You are disturbing my family. Get out of my house. Mom stood up too, her napkin falling to the floor. Graham, please, she pleaded. Do not make a scene. He is just confused. He is not confused, Dana, Graham shouted. He turned on her, his face flushing a deep ugly red. He is a menace. He is a liar, and he is leaving now. Leo shrank back into the sofa cushions in the living room, his eyes wide. I sat frozen, my heart hammering against my ribs. The adrenaline was hitting my system, sharpening my vision. This was it. This was the moment the facade cracked. Silas did not stand up. He remained seated, looking up at Graham with an eerie calm. I am not leaving, Silas said. Graham laughed. It was a manic, breathless sound. You are not leaving. I will call the police. I will have you dragged out of here in handcuffs. Do you know who I am? Do you know who the police chief has lunch with every Tuesday? I know exactly who you are, Graham, Silas said. That is the problem. Silas reached into the inner pocket of his tattered coat. Graham flinched, stepping back as if Silas was reaching for a gun. But it was not a gun. Silas pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was wrinkled and stained with what looked like coffee and dirt, but the seal was unbroken. He tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy slap right between the turkey and the candied yams. "I did not come here to beg for food," Silas said, his voice hard as steel. "And I did not come here for your charity. I came to take back what you stole." "Stole?" Mom whispered. She looked at Graham, her eyes wide with confusion. "Graham? What is he talking about? He is crazy." Graham yelled. "Do not listen to him. He is a paranoid schizophrenic. I have seen his file. He thinks the government is tracking his teeth." Silas ignored him. He looked at me. "Open it, Chloe." I looked at the envelope. Then I looked at Graham. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving. He looked like he wanted to lunge across the table and snatch the packet, but something was holding him back. Fear. He was terrified of touching it. I reached out. My hand was shaking. Just a little. I picked up the envelope. The paper felt gritty. I tore open the top. Inside there was a stack of legal documents. I pulled them out. The paper was high quality, heavy bond, the kind used for official contracts. At the top of the first page, there was a blue ink stamp. It read. I scanned the header. Irrevocable grantor trust. My eyes skipped down the legal jargon, the wheres and the herebys, searching for the names. Grantor Silas, a Mercer trustee, Graham Vale. My breath hitched. I looked further down. Primary beneficiary. The name was typed in bold, uppercase letters. Chloe Elizabeth Gonzalez. I stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. "Chloe," Mom asked. "What is it?" I looked up at Silas. He was watching me with an expression of intense sorrow. "Me?" I whispered. "Why is my name on this?" Mom leaned over my shoulder. She read the line. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Chloe." "Why? I do not understand." Graham's face had drained of all color. He looked like a corpse standing upright. "Give me that." Graham hissed. He lunged forward. I pulled the papers back, clutching them to my chest. "No," I said. "It is a forgery." Graham screamed. He was losing it now. The polished executive was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. He typed it up at the library. "It means nothing. It is garbage. It is notarized," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I recognized the seal. I recognized the formatting. I worked in compliance. I knew what a real document looked like. And I knew what Graham's signature looked like. It was right there at the bottom of the page. "Why?" I asked Silas. "I do not even know you. You knew me once." Silas said softly, "When you were very small. Before your father died. Before Graham came into the picture and rewrote history." He looked at Graham. "Tell her." "Graham." "Tell her about the seed capital for Kestrel Ridge. Tell her whose money built the office you sit in. Tell her whose patent algorithms run the trading floor." Graham was shaking. He looked at the door, then back at us. "He's lying," Graham said. His voice was a low growl. He was an employee, a low-level analyst who got fired for embezzlement. He stole from the company. He stole from us. I looked at the papers again. The date was from 10 years ago. Right around the time Graham married my mother. Right around the time our lives suddenly got easier. When the debts disappeared and the new cars appeared. "The beneficiary is me," I said, my mind racing. "Not Mom." "Me. Because I knew Dana would never leave him," Silas said, not looking at my mother. "I knew Graham would control her. But I hoped that if I put it in your name, held in trust until you were 30, he could not touch it." He paused. "I was wrong." He found a way to touch it anyway. He found a way to make me disappear so he could become the trustee. And now that you are turning 30 next month, he is preparing to close the trust and transfer the assets to himself. Liar. Graham shrieked. He grabbed a wine bottle by the neck. For a second, I thought he was going to swing it. Get out of my house. Graham roared. The room was vibrating with violence. My mother was sobbing now. Quiet. Broken sound. Silas stood up slowly. He did not flinch at the bottle. He looked at Graham with absolute contempt. He turned to the door. He buttoned his ragged coat with dignified slowness. I am leaving, Silas said. He walked to the entryway. Graham stood panting, the wine bottle dangling from his hand. But before Silas opened the door, he turned back. He looked at Graham, then at the house, the high ceilings, the expensive art, the perfect fan-folded napkins. You keep telling me to leave your house, Graham, Silas said. He pointed a dirty finger at the papers in my hand. But if you read Clause 4, Section B, you will see the truth. Silas's eyes locked onto mine. This is not his house, he said. No. It is hers. He opened the door and walked out into the cold Thanksgiving night, leaving us alone with the turkey, the lies, and the piece of paper that had just destroyed our lives. I did not let him walk into the dark. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut behind Silas Mercer, the spell of paralysis in the dining room broke. Graham was still standing there, his chest heaving, clutching the neck of the Pen Noir bottle like a club. My mother was weeping into her hands. I did not look at them. I turned and ran. I threw open the front door and stepped out into the biting Colorado air. The wind cut through my thin sweater, but I did not feel it. Silas was already halfway down the driveway, his gait uneven, his head bowed against the gale. Silas! I shouted. He did not stop. He kept walking, a solitary shadow moving toward the Trian. I ran down the steps, my heels clicking loudly on the frozen pavement. I caught up to him just as he reached the brick pillar of the gate. I grabbed the sleeve of his coat. The wool was damp and smelled of old rain. Stop, I said, gasping for breath. You cannot just drop a bomb like that and walk away. Silas turned. Under the porch lights, he looked even older than he had inside. The adrenaline that had sustained him during the confrontation with Graham was fading, leaving him shaking. His hands were trembling violently. I did not drop a bomb. Chloe, he said, his voice thin. I just returned a piece of mail. I looked back at the house through the large bay window. I could see Graham moving. He was pacing. We cannot talk here, I said. If he comes out, he will call the police or worse. I pulled him toward the side of the house. There was a service entrance off the kitchen, a mudroom where we kept the muddy boots and the recycling bins. It was unglamorous, but it was out of the line of sight from the dining room. Silas resisted for a second, then slumped. He let me lead him. We stumbled into the mudroom. It was cold, but warmer than the outside. I locked the door behind us and flipped on the dim overhead light. Silas leaned against the washing machine, sliding down until he was sitting on the tiled floor. He looked like a puppet with cut strings. I knelt in front of him. The envelope was still clutched in my hand. Talk, I said. And do not give me riddles. Who are you really? And why does my stepfather look like he wants to kill you? Silas closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, the fog was gone. The sharp analytical intelligence I had glimpsed earlier was back. I told you, he said. I am a co-founder, but not of Kestrel Ridge as you know it today. I shook my head. That is impossible. Kestrel Ridge was founded by Graham Vale and the board of directors in 2010. I have read the company history. It is in the employee handbook. It is on the plaque in the lobby. Silas let out a dry hacking laugh. History is written by the people who own the ink. Chloe Kestrel Ridge started 3 years before that in a basement in Boulder. It was me, Graham, and a brilliant quant analyst named Eris who is now conveniently dead. We built the algorithmic trading model that the entire firm runs on. My mind raced. The trading model. The black box. It was the company's crown jewel. The secret sauce that made Kestrel Ridge billions. Everyone assumed Graham had purchased the code. You wrote the code? I asked. I wrote the logic, Silas said. Graham wrote the contracts. And when the model started printing money, Graham realized he did not want to split the pie 3 ways. He looked at his hands. They were scarred and dirty, but I could imagine them typing on a keyboard, building empires out of data. How did he do it? I asked. How did he erase you? The oldest trick in the corporate playbook, Silas said. Embezzlement. He planted funds in a personal account I used for research expenses. Then he brought in a compliance team he owned. They froze my assets on a Monday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, they had a confession I never signed. By Wednesday, they threatened to prosecute if I did not sign over my equity and vanish. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This sounded familiar. It sounded exactly like the restructuring threat I had received in my email. The soft pressure. The fabricated evidence. I fought it. Fourth, Silas continued. But lawyers cost money. And Graham had frozen everything. He took my house. He took my reputation. He used the internal company newsletter to paint me as a traitor who stole from pension funds. He destroyed my name so thoroughly that even my own brother would not take my calls. I stared at the envelope in my hand and the trust that was the fail-safe. Silas said. I set it up before the fall. I knew Graham was getting greedy. I moved a block of assets, early crypto holdings, some intellectual property rights into an irrevocable trust. I named a beneficiary he would never suspect. Me, I whispered. But why? Because you were the only thing in that house he could not control. Silas said. I saw you once when you were 19. You came to the office to bring Graham his lunch. You looked at the trading floor with this look. Not of awe, but of suspicion. You asked me why the monitors were refreshing at different rates. You noticed the lag. He smiled faintly. Graham saw a stepdaughter. I saw an auditor. I knew that if anyone could ever unlock that trust and use the weapon inside, it would be the girl who noticed the lag. I gripped the envelope tighter. So, you came back now because the trust is maturing? No, Silas said. His face went rigid. I came back because yesterday morning someone slipped a note under the cardboard box I sleep in. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. He handed it to me. It was a printout. Plain white paper. Courier font. They are scrubbing the archives this week. If you want to live, knock on the door at Thanksgiving dinner. Ask for the napkins. I read it twice. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was not just about money. Someone knew Silas was alive. Someone knew he was a threat. And someone wanted him to come here to this house tonight. Who sent this? I asked. I do not know, Silas said. But whoever it is, they know Graham's schedule and they know I am running out of time. Suddenly, the door to the kitchen swung open. I jumped, shoving the note behind my back. My mother stood there. She looked small in the doorway, wringing her hands in her apron. Her eyes were red. Chloe, she whispered. Graham is looking for you. He is on the phone with security. She looked at Silas, huddled on the floor by the washing machine. Her expression wavered between disgust and recognition. Is it true? She asked. Her voice was trembling. What he said at the table. I stood up. Mom, listen to me. This man is not crazy. He knows things about the company. He knows things about Graham. He is a con artist. Chloe, Mom hissed, stepping into the mudroom and closing the door behind her. Look at him. He smells like a sewer. Graham says he is dangerous. Graham is lying. Mom, I snapped. Since when does Graham tell the truth about anything? Since when does he not manipulate every single conversation to win? Mom flinched. She looked at Silas again. I remember you, she said softly. Silas looked up. Hello. Dana. You came to the wedding. Mom said you wore a blue suit. You gave us the silver candlesticks. Silas nodded. I did. Graham sold them a month later. Mom put a hand to her mouth. Graham told me you were in prison. He told me you hurt a child. Silas closed his eyes. That is a new one. He usually sticks to financial crimes. It is more on brand. Mom looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. She wanted me to tell her it was okay to go back to the dining room. She wanted me to tell her that the pie was ready and the nightmare was over. But I could not do that. Mom, I said, holding up the envelope. This is legal. It is real. There is a trust fund in my name. Graham has been hiding it for 10 years. Mom shook her head. No. Graham takes care of us. He pays the mortgage. He paid for your college. Chloe. He paid for my college with my own money. I realized it as I said it. The generosity. The tuition checks. It was all coming from the assets he had stolen from Silas, or maybe even from the trust itself, siphoned off through fees. Mom, please, I said. Just for once. Do not choose the comfortable lie. Look at the facts. The kitchen door handle rattled. We all froze. The door swung open. Graham filled the frame. He had shed his jacket. His sleeves were rolled up. He did not look like a CEO anymore. He looked like a butcher. Get away from him. Chloe. Graham said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. He stepped into the small room. The space instantly felt too small. I stood in front of Silas. No. Graham looked at me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. I had never seen it before. I had seen annoyance. I had seen disappointment. But I had never seen him look at me like I was an enemy combatant. Give me the envelope, Graham said. I put it behind my back. Graham took a step forward. Dana. Get her out of the way. Mom did not move. She was pressed against the dryer. Her eyes wide. Graham. Stop, Mom whispered. You are scaring me. I am scaring you. Graham laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. I am the only thing standing between this family and the street. Do you think this luxury comes free? Do you think the country club membership pays for itself? I did what I had to do. I did what was necessary. He admitted it. He did not even realize he was doing it. He was so arrogant. So used to controlling the narrative that he thought justification was the same as innocence. He turned his eyes to Silas. You should have stayed dead. Silas. I am not dead yet. Silas said from the floor. And neither is the paper trail. Graham lunged. It was clumsy. He was a man of boardrooms, not bar fights. I sidestepped him. But he managed to grab my arm. His grip was bruising. Give it to me, he shouted. I shoved him back. I was younger, faster, and fueled by a lifetime of suppressed rage. He stumbled back against the recycling bin, knocking over a stack of empty wine bottles. The crash was deafening. Get out, I screamed. Graham straightened up. He looked at the shattered glass, then at me. He smoothed his shirt. The mask slid back into place. Fine, he said. You want to play detective? Go ahead. Keep the papers. They are copies anyway. Without the original key, that trust is just a piece of paper and you will never find the key. I felt the heavy iron key in the envelope pressing against my spine. He did not know. He thought Silas only had the papers. He did not know about the physical key. Graham pointed a finger at me. If you walk out of this room with him, Chloe, do not come back. You are fired. You are disowned. I will make sure you never work in this industry again. I will bury you. So deep in litigation, you will need a submarine to see the sun. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had demanded I fold my napkins into a bishop's hat while he stole millions from his partner. I looked at my mother. She was crying silently, unable to look at me. She had made her choice. She was staying in the warm house with the monster. I helped Silas to his feet. I am not the one who is going to be buried. Graham, I said. I opened the exterior door of the mudroom. The cold wind rushed in again, cleansing the air. Come on, Silas, I said. We walked out into the night. I did not look back at the house. I heard Graham shouting something behind us, but the wind tore his words away. We walked to my car. A sensible sedan parked at the end of the driveway. I unlocked it and helped Silas into the passenger seat. He groaned as he sat down. I got in the driver's seat and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. Where are we going? Silas asked. I started the engine. The heater kicked on. I looked at the envelope on my lap. I opened the flap and pulled out the small heavy iron key. It looked ancient. You said I was the beneficiary, I said. Silas nodded. You are. Then I am done being the victim, I said. I put the car in gear. Silas looked at me. The shadows of the streetlights played across his face. You are not a random victim, Chloe, he said. His voice was grave. You are the key. And they are trying to break you in the lock. I gripped the steering wheel. Let them try, I said. I slammed on the gas. The tires spun on the gravel. And then we were moving. Leaving the perfect house on the hill behind us. Driving straight into the darkness where the truth was waiting. The drive to my apartment was a blur of streetlights and silence. Silas slept in the passenger seat. His head leaned against the window. Exhausted by the adrenaline crash. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My mind replaying the scene in the dining room like a corrupted video file. When we arrived at my place, a modest one-bedroom in a complex that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner, I did not offer Silas food or a shower. Not yet. I settled him onto the beige sofa with a blanket, and then I went straight to my kitchen island. I cleared away the stack of unpaid bills and set up my laptop. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. The world outside was dark, but the world inside my screen was blindingly bright. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the plastic key card Silas had given me under the harsh light of the kitchen pendant. It looked innocuous. Just a piece of yellowing plastic with the Kestrel Ridge Hawk logo fading near the edges. But to a compliance officer, it was not just plastic. It was a credential. I had a USB card reader in my bag. A standard piece of equipment for remote work. I plugged it into my laptop. The computer chimed. I took a deep breath and swiped the card. I expected an error message. I expected a red box saying access denied or card expired. Kestrel Ridge updated its security protocols every 90 days. A card this old should have been digital garbage. Instead, a terminal window popped up. Verifying legacy protocol handshake complete. Welcome user admin. Shadow 04. My breath hitched. It was not a standard employee login. It was a root access profile likely created during the system's infancy and never purged. It bypassed the modern biometric firewall because the system viewed it as a foundational architect. Something too deep in the code to question. I was in. I did not go for the personnel files. I did not go for the emails. I went straight for the money. I opened the data warehouse interface. It was a sprawling map of numbers and nodes, a digital representation of billions of dollars moving through the veins of the global economy. I typed in a query for the charity and outreach sector. Silas had mentioned a trust, but trusts are fed by income streams. If Graham was stealing, he had to be moving the money somewhere before it landed in his pocket. The screen filled with rows of data. First glance, it looked clean. Kestrel Ridge donated millions to various causes: art museums, opera houses, cancer research. But I filtered the search. I looked for the outliers. I looked for the Thanksgiving Fund. It was officially listed as the Season of Giving Initiative, a charitable arm chaired by my mother, Dana Hart. It was supposed to provide meals for the indigent. I pulled the transaction logs for the last 18 months. I stared at the screen. The pattern was so obvious. It was insulting. Most charities receive lump sums. A check for $50,000 here. A grant for $100,000 there. But this fund was different. It was receiving thousands of microtransactions. $9,500, $9,800, $9,900. They were all just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. In the banking world, we call this structuring or smuffing. It is the most basic, clumsy form of money laundering there is. You break a large sum into small chunks to avoid triggering a currency transaction report to the federal government. I exported the data into a spreadsheet. I ran a pivot table to sum the totals. In the last 18 months, the fund had processed $3,800,000, $3.8 million for turkeys. You could feed the entire state of Colorado for that. I traced the outflow. The money did not go to food banks. It went to 3 vendors: Blue Horizon Logistics, Peak Valley Consulting, and Terra Irma Solutions. I opened a separate browser window and searched for these companies. They had no websites, no LinkedIn profiles. I pulled their registration documents from the Secretary of State database. They were all limited liability companies registered in Delaware to the same registered agent address, a mailbox in a strip mall, and the authorized signatory for all 3. It was not Graham. He was too smart for that. It was GV Holdings Trust. I clicked through the layers. It was like peeling a rotten onion. GV Holdings was managed by a law firm, but the billing address for the firm's retainer. It was my parents' house. I felt a wave of nausea. Graham was stealing money from the company's investment returns, funneling it into a charity that my mother unwittingly put her face on, breaking it down into small chunks to hide it from the IRS, and then washing it back to himself through shell companies. It was elegant. It was evil. And it was exactly the kind of thing I was supposed to catch. I remembered 6 months ago the project I was kicked off. I had flagged data irregularities in the nonprofit sector. I had told my boss Marcus that the timestamps on the charity transfers looked manipulated. I had been right. I had not been paranoid. I had been standing on top of a crime scene, and they had gaslit me into believing I was crazy to get me to step off. I looked up. Silas was standing in the doorway of the bedroom. He was wrapped in the blanket, looking like a biblical prophet who had lost his way. "You found it," he said. His voice was rough with sleep. I pointed at the screen. $3.8 million in 18 months, I said. Structuring shell companies. It is textbook laundering. Silas shuffled over and looked at the glowing rows of numbers. "That is just the skim," he said quietly. "That is his walking around money. The real theft is in the equity he stole from me. But this is the thread that unravels the sweater." I started taking screenshots. I did not trust the cloud. I did not trust the save button. I took physical photos of the screen with a digital camera I dug out of a drawer. Then I exported the raw data files. I opened a command prompt. I ran a checksum utility to generate a cryptographic hash of the files SHA-26. It created a unique digital fingerprint for the data. If anyone tried to alter these files later to claim I forged them, the hash would not match. This was chain of custody 101. I was preserving the evidence like I was preparing for a murder trial because that is what this was. A murder of the truth. Suddenly, There was a sound at my front door. The turning of a lock. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at the time. 3:45 in the morning. Only one other person had a key to my apartment. I slammed the laptop shut and shoved the plastic card under the toaster. The door opened. Chloe. It was my mother. She stepped inside, shaking snow off her coat. She looked wrecked. Her makeup was smeared. Her eyes swollen almost shut. She was wearing sweatpants and boots. A jarring departure from the perfectly tailored woman who had hosted dinner hours ago. Mom. I stood up, blocking the view of the kitchen island. What are you doing here? She rushed toward me. She smelled of cold air and Graham's expensive car leather. I drove over. She sobbed. Graham is beside himself. He is on the phone with the lawyers. Chloe. You have to stop this. She reached for my hands. Her palms were damp. Where is he? She whispered, looking around wildly. Is that man here? He is sleeping, I said coldly. And his name is Silas. Mom, please. You have to listen to me. Mom squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. No. You listen to me. Graham says you stole confidential property. He says he can have you arrested. He says, if you return the papers and the whatever else you took, he will let it go. He will pay for you to take a sabbatical. You can go to Europe. You can rest. I pulled my hands away. Rest? Mom. I am not tired. I am furious. I walked back to the laptop. I opened it. The screen flared to life, illuminating the spreadsheet. Look at this, Mom. I said. She recoiled. I do not want to see it. Look at it. I shouted. I pointed to the column labeled Season of Giving Fund. This is your charity. Mom. The one you are so proud of. The one you give speeches for. Look where the money is going. Terra Firma Solutions. Do you know what that is? It is Graham. It is all Graham. He is using your name to wash dirty money. Mom shook her head violently, covering her ears like a child. Stop it. I do not understand these numbers. Graham takes care of the finances. That is his job. He is making you an accomplice to a federal crime. I said if the FBI walks in here tomorrow, your name is on the header of this fund. You could go to prison. Mom. She began to cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her small frame. Why are you doing this? She wailed. We were happy. We were safe. Why did you have to open the door? Why did you have to let him in? I looked at her. I saw the fear that had been piloting her life for the last 10 years. She was not protecting Graham because she loved him. She was protecting him because the alternative, admitting that her perfect life was built on a crime, was too terrifying to contemplate. I did not let him in. Mom, I said softly. The truth was already inside. It was rotting under the floorboards. I just turned on the light. Mom looked up at me. Her face was a mask of tragedy. Graham will destroy you. Chloe, she whispered. He has destroyed better people than you. He will take your job. He will take your home. He will make sure you never work again. Please. Just give it back. Be my daughter. Be a good girl. I felt a crack in my chest. I looked at the woman who had taught me to fold napkins and smile when I was hurting. I loved her. But I could not be her. I am already destroyed. Mom, I said, my voice was steady. Surprising even me. My career is a joke. My integrity is gone. I have spent 5 years working for a lie. If he wants to take the rest, let him try. Mom stared at me for a long time. Then slowly the light went out of her eyes. She realized she had lost. She stepped back. She buttoned her coat with trembling fingers. You are making a mistake, she said. Her voice was hollow. She turned and walked out the door. She did not look back. She did not say goodbye. She just closed the door, leaving me in the silence of the kitchen. I stood there for a moment, listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. I felt a profound sense of isolation. I had just severed the last tether to my safety net. I turned back to the computer. Silas was watching me. He did not say anything. He knew there was nothing to say. I sat down. I had the data. I had the hash. But possession was not enough. If Graham came for me and he would try to wipe my devices. He would try to physically take the evidence. I needed insurance. I opened a secure email client. I composed a new message to my personal email BCC. 3 journalists I trusted from industry conferences. Subject: Kestrel Ridge Capital. The Thanksgiving files. Full dump. I attached the spreadsheet. I attached the screenshots. I attached the hash file and a text document explaining the chain of custody. Then I went to the scheduling options. I set the email to send in 72 hours. 3 days. I added a condition. If I logged in and clicked a specific link, the timer would reset. If I did not, if I was arrested, if I was hospitalized, or if I simply disappeared, the email would go out. It was a dead man's switch, a nuclear option. I clicked schedule. The screen confirmed message scheduled. I closed the laptop. I looked at Silas now. I said, "We need to move. They know where I live." Silas nodded. He stood up and gathered his blanket. "You are a dangerous woman, Chloe Gonzalez," he said. I looked at the plastic card sitting on the counter. "I am not dangerous," I said. "I am just compliant, and I'm about to conduct the most aggressive audit this company has ever seen." The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a digital execution. I woke up at 7 o'clock on the sofa, my neck stiff and my mouth tasting like stale coffee. The blanket I had given Silas was folded neatly at the other end of the couch. But Silas was gone. I called his name, checking the bathroom and the small kitchenette. But the apartment was empty. He had vanished as quietly as he had arrived, leaving nothing behind but the faint, lingering smell of wood smoke and old wool. I reached for my phone to call him, realizing halfway through the motion that he did not have a phone. Then I saw the notifications. There were 19 of them. The first was from the Kestrel Ridge IT department. Alert: suspicious activity detected. Remote access session terminated. The second was from Human Resources. Subject: notice of administrative leave pending internal investigation. I sat down on the edge of the coffee table, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I tapped on my work email app. It did not open. Instead, a gray box appeared with a padlock icon and a single word: disabled. They had not just locked the door. They had changed the locks and burned the key. I tried my laptop. I entered my password. Incorrect credentials. I tried the admin backdoor I had used the night before. Access denied. They had plugged the hole. The speed of it was terrifying. It meant that while I was sleeping, a team of engineers had been awake, scrubbing my digital existence from the company servers. Then my phone rang. The screen displayed the name Marcus Thorne. He was my direct supervisor, a man who viewed empathy as a quarterly liability. I swiped to answer. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. I needed to record this, but I knew better than to use a device they might be monitoring. I grabbed my old digital recorder from the junk drawer and pressed play. "Chloe," Marcus said. His voice was warm. It was a terrifyingly soft, reasonable voice. The kind of voice you use when you are talking a jumper off a ledge. "Good morning, Marcus," I said. "I assume you are calling to explain why I cannot log in." "I am calling because we are concerned about you," Marcus said. "We received some disturbing reports early this morning. Irregular login times, large data transfers flagged by the automated security protocols. It looks like a breakdown." "Chloe, a breakdown?" I repeated. We know you have been under a lot of stress. Marcus continued. The holiday season can be difficult, and with the recent performance reviews, well, we think you might be having a crisis. We are placing you on paid administrative leave effective immediately. Because letting the silence do the heavy lifting. Do not worry about the data, Chloe. We are scrubbing the breach. We are not going to press charges for corporate espionage. Provided you cooperate. We just want you to get well. Take some time. Disconnect. He was not firing me. He was diagnosing me. He was framing my investigation as a mental health episode. If I fought back now, if I screamed about money laundering and shell companies, I would just sound like the hysterical woman he was painting me to be. I understand, Marcus, I said, keeping my voice flat. Good, he said. Oh, and Chloe, a courier will be by later to collect your company laptop and phone. Just hand them over. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. The line went dead. I looked at the phone. Do not make this harder. That was code. It meant stay down or we will kick you until you do. But my biggest problem was not Marcus. It was Silas. He had not just wandered off. He was smart. But he was frail and he was terrified. He would not have left the safety of my apartment unless he was forced or unless he was lured. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door. The drive to my mother's house in Marston Ridge took 40 minutes. I did it in 25. The sky was a brutal blinding blue. The kind that makes the snow look like crushed diamonds. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked perfect. The wreath was straight. The snow was shoveled. It was a fortress of normally. I used my key to open the front door. Mom, I called out. She was in the living room vacuuming. She was wearing yoga pants and a cashmere sweater, moving the vacuum back and forth with obsessive rhythm. She looked up when I entered and her face went pale. Chloe, she said over the roar of the machine. She turned it off. The silence that followed was ringing. Where is he? I asked. Mom blinked. Who's Silas? I said. He was at my place. Now he is gone. Did Graham call him? Did Graham send someone? Mom sighed. She wound the cord around the vacuum handle. He came here. Chloe, she said. My stomach dropped when early this morning. She said around 6 o'clock I was making coffee. He knocked on the back door. He said he felt guilty for causing such a scene. He said he did not want to ruin your life or ours. She looked me in the eye. She was lying. I could see the tremor in her hands. He asked for a little money for a bus ticket. Mom continued. Graham gave him $500. He took it and he left. He said he was going west. He said he would not bother us again. I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. He took $500. I asked. The man who refused to beg for food. The man who owns $1/3 billion company. You expect me to believe he took cash and walked away. It is the truth. Mom said. Her voice rising. Why can you not just let it be? He is gone. Chloe. It is over. Graham walked into the room. He was wearing his weekend uniform khakis and a polo shirt. He held a mug of coffee. He looked relaxed. He looked victorious. Lower your voice. Chloe. Graham said pleasantly. You are upsetting your mother. Where did you send him? Graham. I asked. Graham took a sip of coffee. I did not send him anywhere. I helped a man in need. I gave him transport money. It was the Christian thing to do. He smiled. It was a smile that did not reach his eyes. He was a troubled soul, Graham said. But at least he knew when he had overstayed his welcome. It is good that he finally knew his place. He knew his place. That was the slip. Silas did not know his place. Silas had spent the last 10 years fighting to reclaim his place. He would never have surrendered for $500. Graham walked past me. He patted my shoulder. It was a heavy, possessive touch. "I heard about your leave of absence," Graham said softly. "It is for the best. You look tired. You look like you are seeing things that are not there." I pulled away from him. "I'm going to check my car," I said. "I think I left my scarf." I turned and walked out before I did something that would get me arrested. I walked to my sedan parked in the driveway. I unlocked it. The glove box was open. I froze. I had locked the car. I always lock the car. I leaned in. The contents of the glove box were scattered on the passenger seat. My insurance card. The manual. A few old receipts. But the manila envelope was gone. The physical copy of the trust. The chain of custody logs I had printed. The photos I had taken of the screen. All gone. I felt a cold sweat break out on my back. They had not just scrubbed the servers. They had scrubbed me. They had broken into my car. Probably while I was inside arguing with Mom, and taken the only physical proof I had. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text message. "Send her unknown number." I opened it. It was a photograph. The image was grainy, taken in low light. It showed a hand. Graham's hand. I recognized the signate ring holding a lighter. Under the flame was the corner of a thick legal document. I could just make out the words "Irrevocable Grantor Trust" before the paper curled into black ash. Below the image was a single line of text. "Do not think you are the beneficiary anymore." I stared at the screen. The threat was elegant in its brutality. They were telling me that the paper trail was dead. They were telling me that my status as the heir to a fortune was smoke. But they had made a mistake. They thought the paper was the power. They were old men thinking in an analog world. They thought that by burning the original deed, they destroyed the ownership. They did not know about the hash file. They did not know about the dead man switch I had set up on the email server. They did not know that data once created is harder to kill than a human being. But I could not let them know that. Not yet. I needed them to think they had one. I needed them to think I was broken. I took a deep breath. I forced my face to crumple. I summoned every ounce of fear and exhaustion I had felt over the last 24 hours. I walked back into the house. Mom and Graham were in the kitchen. Graham was reading the tablet. Mom was washing dishes. I stood in the doorway and let my shoulders slump. I let the tears come. It was not hard. I was terrified. "You were right," I whispered. Graham looked up. He set the tablet down. "About what?" he asked. "Everything," I said, my voice shaking. "The stress. The paranoia. I do not know what I was thinking. I just wanted to help him. I thought he was telling the truth." I walked over to the island and leaned against it, burying my face in my hands. "I lost my job." "Didn't I?" I sobbed. "Marcus called. They locked me out." Graham stood up. He walked over to me. He put his arm around me. This time I did not pull away. I leaned into him. It made my skin crawl. But I did it. "Shh," Graham soothed. "You did not lose your job. I will make a few calls. We will frame it as a medical leave. You just need rest. You need to stop chasing ghosts." He squeezed my shoulder. "The papers were fake, Chloe," he said softly. "I burned them to protect you. You do not want to be involved in a fraud investigation." I nodded against his chest. "Thank you," I whispered. Mom turned around. She looked relieved. She looked like she had just been granted a stay of execution. "Oh, Chloe," she said. "I am so glad. We can fix this. We can just go back to normal." "Normal," I repeated. "Go upstairs," Graham said. "Lie down in your old room. I will handle Marcus. I will handle everything." I nodded again. I wiped my eyes. "Okay," I said. "I just need to sleep." I walked up the stairs. I felt their eyes on my back. The eyes of a mother who chose comfort over courage. And a stepfather who thought he had just declawed a kitten. I entered my old bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it 10 years ago. The debate trophies on the shelf. The poster of the band I used to love. It was a shrine to a girl who no longer existed. I closed the door. I locked it. My face changed. The tears stopped instantly. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I sat down on the bed and pulled out my phone. I opened the smart home app that controlled the doorbell camera. Graham thought he was clever. He thought that by deleting the footage, he had removed the evidence. But he did not understand how cloud storage worked. He did not understand that delete on a user interface is just a request, not a command. The data stays on the physical server for 30 days before it is overwritten. I could not retrieve the video file without a subpoena, but I could see the metadata. I pulled up the activity log for the doorbell. For 12 a.m. Motion detected. 4:15 a.m. User admin deleted footage. 4:15 a.m. System log device ID 8842. Access settings. I tapped on the device ID. Graham's phone. But that was not the smoking gun. The smoking gun was what happened at 4:12 in the morning. I looked at the bandwidth usage graph. Even without the video, the data stream showed a spike. Someone had come to the door. And then a second spike at 4:20. Motion detected backyard sensor. Graham said Silas left at 6. The log said someone went out the back door at 4:20. I opened the weather app history. It had snowed lightly starting at 5. If Silas had left at 4:20, his footprints would be covered by the snow. But if someone had dragged him or carried him, I went to the window. I looked down at the backyard. It was a pristine sheet of white. But near the tree and where the snowplow piled the drifts from the road, there was a disturbance. A subtle unevenness in the white blanket. Graham had not sent Silas away on a bus. I looked at the phone again. I was not going to find Silas by crying. I was not going to find him by asking Graham. I was going to find him by following the digital breadcrumbs that arrogant men always leave behind because they think the world forgets as quickly as they do. I opened my encrypted email draft. The dead man switch. I added a new line to the narrative. Update physical evidence stolen. Subject Silas Mercer missing. Primary suspect Graham Vale. If I do not report in by midnight, assume I have been taken to the same place. I hit save. Then I stood up and walked to the closet. I dug out my old hiking boots. I was done being the victim. It was time to go hunting. I waited until Graham left for the office to do damage control. He backed his Mercedes out of the driveway with the aggressive speed of a man who believes he can outrun a storm, leaving my mother alone in the house that was slowly turning into a mausoleum of lies. I did not stay in my room. I put on my coat, checked my pocket to ensure the heavy iron key, the one thing I had kept on my body, the one thing Graham had failed to find in my car, was still there. Then I walked out the back door, cutting through the snowy yard to avoid the front door camera, just in case Graham was watching the feed remotely. My destination was not the police station. It was a small brick building in downtown Denver, sandwiched between an artisanal coffee shop and a dry cleaner. Patterson Finch. It was the law firm Silas had mentioned in the trust paperwork I had briefly scanned before Graham burned the copies. The clerk at the front desk looked at me with suspicion. I looked like a woman who had not slept in 24 hours because I was. But when I slapped the iron key on the counter and gave the account number Silas had made me memorize in the mudroom, her attitude shifted. Possession of the key was 9/10 of the law here. She led me to a private viewing room. She placed a long metal safety deposit box on the table and left me alone. My hands trembled as I inserted the key. I expected cash. I expected diamonds. I expected the kind of tangible wealth that people kill for in movies. But when I lifted the lid, there was only paper. The original trust deed. The ink was blue and fresh. preserved perfectly in the airless dark of the box. I began to read, and as I read, the floor of my reality fell away. The assets in the trust were not liquid. There were no bank accounts filled with millions of dollars. The trust held exactly one asset: a 20% equity stake in Kestrel Ridge Capital, structured as Class A voting shares. I sat back in the leather chair. The breath knocked out of me. Silas had not been fired for embezzlement. He had been forced out. But he had refused to sell his shares. Graham had frozen them, hidden them, pretended they did not exist. But he had never been able to legally seize them because he needed Silas's signature. And Silas had moved them here. If this trust was valid, I did not just have money, I had power. With 20% of the voting stock, I was the single largest individual shareholder in the company. I could call for an audit. I could block a board vote. I could fire the CEO. I could fire Graham. But why me? That was the question that had haunted me since Thanksgiving. Why Chloe Gonzalez? I turned to the appendix of the document. There was a handwritten letter clipped to the back. The handwriting was jagged, frantic. To the trustee, I am designating Chloe Gonzalez as the beneficiary, not out of sentiment, but out of strategy. She is the only person in that house who owes Graham Vale nothing. When she was 18, she applied for the Future Leader Scholarship. Graham denied it because he wanted her to attend a state school to save money for his own investments. I funded the scholarship personally under the corporate umbrella. She thinks she won it on merit. She did. But the check came from me. She is smart. She is suspicious. She is the flaw in Graham's design. He thinks she is weak because she is quiet. He is wrong. I stared at the letter, the scholarship, the full ride to the University of Colorado that had allowed me to graduate debt-free. I had always been so proud of that. I had framed the acceptance letter. I had thanked Graham for helping me apply. Graham had tried to stop it. Silas had saved it. I was not a random victim. I was an investment Silas had made 10 years ago, waiting for it to mature. I flipped the page. There was one more document. It was a printout of an email, dated 6 months before my mother married Graham. From Silas Mercer to Dana Hart. Subject: you need to know Dana. I know you think he is the answer to your debts. I know you are tired of struggling. But you need to look at the books I'm attaching. He is not just aggressive. He is criminal. He is siphoning from the charity accounts. He is risking the entire firm. If you marry him, you are marrying a ticking time bomb. Please, for your children's sake, walk away. I felt a physical sickness rise in my throat. My mother knew. She had not just been willfully blind. She had been warned. She had seen the evidence in black and white 10 years ago. And she had married him anyway. I shoved the papers into my bag. I did not leave them in the box. I was done hiding things in the dark. I drove back to Marston Ridge with a cold hard knot in my stomach. The fear was gone. In its place was a clarity so sharp it felt like a weapon. When I walked into the house, Mom was in the kitchen arranging flowers. It was a grotesque pantomime of normally. Chloe, she asked, looking up. You should be resting, Graham said. I slammed the print out of the email onto the granite countertop. It slid across the surface and hit the vase. You knew? I said. Mom looked at the paper. She did not need to read it. She recognized it instantly. Her face crumpled, not with confusion, but with the exhaustion of a secret she had carried for a decade. Chloe, please, she whispered. You knew he was a thief, I said, my voice rising. Silas told you. He warned you before the wedding, and you married him anyway. You let him move us into this house. You let him pay for my clothes, my food, my life with stolen money. Mom gripped the edge of the counter. You do not understand, she said, her voice shaking. We were drowning. Chloe, Your father left us nothing. The collectors were calling every day. I was going to lose the house. I was going to lose everything. So, you sold us? I said. I saved us. She screamed. The sound tore through the kitchen. She was crying now. Ugly. Desperate tears. Graham promised he would fix it. She sobbed. He said Silas was just jealous. He said the accounting was complicated, that it was just temporary. He said if I stood by him, we would never have to worry about money again, and he kept his word. Chloe, look around you. You have never wanted for anything. I looked around the kitchen. The stainless steel appliances. The imported tile. The view of the snow-capped mountains. I wanted the truth. Mom, I said quietly. I wanted a mother who would protect me from a predator. Not marry him because he paid the bills. Mom sank onto a stool. She buried her face in her hands. He said he would ruin me, she whispered. When I tried to ask questions later, he said I was an accomplice. He said since I signed the tax returns, I would go to jail, too. He said he would take you kids away. I was trapped. Chloe, I was trapped. I looked at her. A small, terrified woman in a big, expensive house. I realized then that Graham's greatest crime was not the money. It was this. He had taken a good woman and turned her into a guard dog for his sins. He is not going to take us away, I said. Because he is going down and you have to decide right now whose side you are on. Mom looked up. Her eyes were full of fear. He will kill you. Chloe. He will destroy you. I touched the bag at my side, feeling the weight of the original trust deed. No. Mom, I said. He won't because for the first time in his life, he does not own the majority vote. I turned to leave. I had one more stop to make. Wait, Mom said. I stopped. She wiped her eyes. She looked at me and for a second I saw a flash of the mother I remembered from my childhood. Before the money. Before Graham. The security system. She said softly. What? Graham deleted the camera footage. She said. But he forgets that the garage has a separate log for the gate. It is not connected to the cloud. It is a local backup. Esther daher. Check the gate log, she said. 4:20 a.m. I nodded. Thank you. I ran to the garage. The control panel was on the wall. I scrolled through the history. 4:20 a.m. Gate open. Remote ID 2.0420 a.m. Gate close. Remote ID 2 was the spare fob, the one kept in the mudroom drawer. But that was not the breakthrough. The breakthrough was that the gate system logged the RFID tag of any vehicle that passed through. Vehicle detected license plate 882 KRT. It was not Graham's Mercedes. It was not Mom's SUV. I pulled out my phone and ran the plate through a public database app one used for work. It came back to a company called Redline Transport Services. I searched the company. It was a shuttle service, a private contractor that specialized in high-risk patient transport. Graham had not driven Silas anywhere. He had called a service usually used to transport psychiatric patients or juvenile delinquents against their will. I looked at the map. Redline Transport had a depot in downtown Denver, right next to the Greyhound bus station. The log Silas left the temporary ID swipe I had found in the data dump the night before. It was at the bus station at 5 a.m. Graham had paid a crew to grab Silas, drag him out the back door, drive him to the station, and put him on a bus. It is a practice called Greyhound therapy. Police do it. Hospitals do it. They dump the homeless in another city to make them someone else's problem. Graham had shipped him out like expired inventory. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. But this time I knew it was not Graham. Target confirmed. I am looking at the footage now. It was Ben. An old friend from college who was now an investigative journalist for the Denver Post. I had called him on the drive over. I called him back immediately. Ben, I said. Tell me you have something. I am at the bus terminal, Ben said. His voice was tiny against the background noise of announcements. I bribed the security guard. I have footage from this morning. 5:15 a.m. Two guys in private security uniforms carry an older man off a shuttle van. They walk him to the ticket counter. They buy a one-way ticket to where I asked. My grip on the phone was so tight my hand ached. Santa Fe, Ben said. The bus left at 5:30. Santa Fe, New Mexico. 6 hours away. Is he on it? I asked. Ben paused. No, Ben said. That is the thing. They bought the ticket. They put him in line. But the footage shows him collapsing on the bench after they left. He did not get on the bus. Chloe. Where is he? Paramedics picked him up at 5:45. Ben said he is at Denver General Jane Doe ward. They think he is just another overdose case. I closed my eyes. He was alive. Chloe, Ben said. His voice serious. If we run this story, if we expose the trust, the money laundering, the kidnapping, you know your life is over, right? The life you knew, the career, the house. Your stepfather will sue you until you are dust. I looked back at the house. I saw my mother standing in the window watching me. She looked like a ghost trapped in a glass cage. That life was over the minute I opened the door. Ben, I said. I got into my car. Meet me at the hospital, I said. Bring your recorder. Bring a notary. And Ben. Yeah, bring a camera, I said. If they want me silent, I will speak in a language they cannot buy. I am going to speak in the record. I hung up and started the engine. I was going to get my co-founder. And then we were going to crash the board meeting. The plan was not born from a moment of passion. It was built on a spreadsheet organized by columns of risk and reward exactly the way Graham Vale had taught me to think. If you want to take down a man who believes he owns the world, you do not throw a brick through his window. You dismantle the foundation of his house brick by brick. While he is busy waving from the balcony, I sat in a small sterile conference room inside Denver General Hospital. Across from me sat Ben, my journalist contact, and a woman named Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was a whistleblower attorney Ben had pulled from his Rolodex. She looked like she slept 3 hours a night and survived on espresso and Spite. Colorado is a one-party consent state, Sarah said, tapping a pen against her legal pad. She did not waste time with pleasantries. That means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without the other person knowing. It is admissible in court. It is admissible to the SEC. And it is certainly admissible to the board of directors. I nodded. I have a digital recorder. I taped it to the inside of my clutch purse. Backup? Sarah asked. Phone app running in the background. Lock screen. I said. And a second phone. A burner in my coat pocket. Dialed into Ben's voicemail. It will record everything as a message. Sarah stopped tapping. Good. Now the bait. You cannot just walk up to him and ask him to confess to money laundering. Graham is a narcissist. But he is not an idiot. You have to feed his ego. I have to lose, I said. Exactly. Ben added. He was checking the levels on his own equipment. You have to go into that gala tonight and play the defeated stepdaughter. You have to validate his worldview. He needs to believe that he broke you. A man like Graham only tells the truth when he thinks there are no consequences. I looked at the hospital bed in the corner. Silas was awake. He looked terrible. His skin the color of old parchment. Tubes running into his arm to rehydrate him after the Red Line transport crew had dumped him. But his eyes were clear. I walked over to him. I held out a clipboard. These are the papers Sarah drafted, I said. A limited power of attorney. It authorizes me to act as your legal representative regarding the Kestrel Ridge holdings and the trust. It allows me to challenge the freezing of your assets. Silas looked at the papers. His hand trembled as he reached for the pen. You are going into the lion's den, Chloe, he whispered. His voice was a rasp damaged by the cold and the exposure. I am not going in alone. I said I have a team and I have you. Silas signed his name. It was shaky but legible. Silas A. Mercer. He handed the clipboard back to me. Then he beckoned me closer. There is something else, he said. I leaned in. Graham thinks he scrubbed the system, Silas said. He thinks that because he controls the servers. He controls the history. But when we built the original architecture, the core trading algorithm, I installed a hard-coded backdoor, a master key. It was designed for emergency shutdowns in case of a market crash. He paused to cough. It is not on the network, he continued. It is accessible only through the physical terminal in the server room, the one with no internet connection. I know the one. I said the legacy terminal. It is in the basement archives. You need a passphrase, Silas said. Graham does not know it. He never bothered to learn the code because he thought he owned the coder. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, but his intensity was burning. Prometheus Unbound. Silas whispered. That is the phrase. If you type that into the root command line, it unlocks the immutable logs. The logs that show every trade, every theft, every dollar he siphoned off for the last 10 years. It shows the original ownership of the Class A shares. Proves everything. Prometheus Unbound. I repeated it. I stored it in the vault of my memory. Rest? Silas, I said. When I come back, we are going to get you a better room. I turned to Ben and Sarah. It is time. I said the season of Thanks Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Omni Hotel. It was an event designed to make rich people feel virtuous about hoarding wealth. The air smelled of expensive lees, roasted beef, and hypocrisy. I wore a black dress I had bought 3 years ago. It was modest, unassuming. I pulled my hair back into a severe bun. I wore very little makeup. I needed to look tired. I needed to look like a woman who had spent the last 48 hours crying in her room. Exactly as Graham had instructed. I checked my purse one last time. The recorder light was taped over with black electrical tape, but the device was running. I walked into the ballroom. The room was a sea of tuxedos and glittering gowns. A string quartet played Vivaldi. In the corner at the center of the room, standing under a massive crystal chandelier, was Graham. He looked magnificent. He was wearing a velvet tuxedo jacket, holding a flute of champagne, laughing at something the mayor was saying. My mother stood beside him, her hand on his arm, smiling that frozen, terrified smile I had come to hate. I took a breath. I walked straight toward him. Graham saw me first. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then reassembled itself into an expression of benevolent pity. He excused himself from the mayor and turned to face me. My mother saw me and gasped. Chloe, what are you doing here? You should be home. I ignored her. I looked straight at Graham. I let my shoulders slump. I clasped my hands in front of me. I came to apologize. Graham, I said. My voice was soft, barely audible over the music. Graham's eyes lit up. It was the reaction of a predator seeing a limp. He stepped closer, creating a small intimate circle of privacy amidst the crowd. I am glad to hear that, Chloe, he said. He took a sip of champagne. It takes a big person to admit when they are broken. I was confused. I said. I looked down at my shoes, the stress, the job, and then that man. He seemed so convincing. But I see now. I see how crazy it all sounds. Graham nodded. He put a hand on my shoulder. Felt heavy. Like a yoke. He was a master manipulator. Chloe. Graham said. Silas always had a way with words. That is how he stole from us in the beginning. He made you think you were special. But you are just a girl who got caught in the crossfire. I need my job back. Graham. I said, injecting a note of desperation into my voice. I checked my bank account. I cannot pay my rent if I am on unpaid leave. Please. I will do anything. I will sign the NDA.
I will destruyan copia zimada.
Just please. Graham chuckled. It was a low rumbling sound. He looked around the room. He felt safe here. He was surrounded by his peers, by his donors, by the people who looked at him and saw God. We can discuss your employment, Graham said magnanimously. But first I need to know that you understand the reality of the situation. I need to know you are truly loyal. I said I know you did what you had to do. The charity. The fun. It is complicated business. I am just an analyst. I do not understand high finance. Graham smiled. He leaned in closer. The smell of his scotch was overpowering. It is not complicated, Chloe. He said. It is necessary. Do you see this gala? Do you see these people? They expect returns. They expect growth. Sometimes the market does not provide that. So, we have to create liquidity by moving money through the Thanksgiving fund. And I asked innocently. Graham waved his hand dismissively. It is just a vehicle. He said. A pipeline. We move capital from the investment side, run it through the nonprofit tax shield to clean it of certain liabilities, and then reinvest it as personal equity. It is how the game is played. Everyone does it. I just do it better. I felt the recorder burning against my side. He had just admitted to tax fraud and money laundering, but I needed more. I needed him to tie it to Silas, and Silas, I asked. He tried to stop you. Silas was a purist. Graham sneered. He thought the algorithm should be pure. He did not understand that the code exists to serve the creators, not the other way around. He threatened to expose the pipeline. He became a liability. So you removed him. I said. I solved the problem. Graham corrected, just like I solved the problem this morning. My heart stopped. This morning, I asked. Graham took another sip. Let us just say Mr. Mercer is on a very long bus ride. Graham said with a wink. He will not be bothering us again. And neither will that ridiculous trust. He squeezed my shoulder again. You are a smart girl. Chloe. You folded. That is good. Smart people know when to fold. Now go get yourself a drink. Fix your face. You look depressing. We will talk about your reinstatement on Monday. He patted my cheek. It was humiliating. It was perfect. Thank you. Graham. I whispered. I turned and walked away. I did not go to the bar. I walked straight to the exit. I kept my head down until I was out of the ballroom, out of the lobby, and standing in the cool night air of the valet circle. Ben pulled up in his beat-up sedan a moment later. I got in. Did you get it? Ben asked. I pulled the recorder out of my purse. I stopped the recording. I got it. I said he admitted to using the charity as a tax shield. He admitted to moving the capital, and he admitted to solving the problem of Silas. Ben punched the steering wheel. Yet, that is a wrap. We can go to the FBI tonight. I sat back in the seat. I watched the valet parking a Bentley. No. I said not yet. Why not? Ben asked. We have him. I replayed the conversation in my head. Something Graham had said. Silas tried to expose the pipeline. He became a liability. But Silas had told me he was framed for embezzlement. He said he was forced out because he refused to sell his shares. Graham's confession was about the money laundering. But the timeline, something was off. Graham was arrogant. But he was also a coward. He did not have the technical skill to frame Silas for a digital crime. Graham was a salesman. He was a handshake guy who wrote the code that framed Silas. I thought about the CFO. The man who had sent me the threatening email. The man who had ordered the scrub of my devices. Graham admitted to the theft. I said slowly. But he did not admit to the setup. Graham is the face. Ben. He is the one enjoying the money. But someone else built the trap. What do you mean? Ben asked. I mean, Graham is a thief. I said. But he is not the architect. He said. We move capital. We create liquidity. Who is we? I looked at the recorder in my hand. This takes down Graham. I said. But if we use it now, the board will just scapegoat him. They will say he was a rogue actor. They will fire him. Keep the money. And the system will keep running. And the person who actually wrote the code to erase Silas, he will just write a new code to erase me. I remembered the text message I had received. Do not think you are the beneficiary anymore. Graham did not send that. Graham was busy burning papers. That text came from inside the network. We are not going to the FBI. I said. Ben looked at me like I was crazy. Then where are we going? I looked at the Kestrel Ridge office tower looming in the distance. A black obelisk against the night sky. We are going to the office. I said. But your access is revoked. Ben said. Your card is dead. I reached into my bra and pulled out the old plastic key card Silas had given me. The one I had hidden when the courier came for my things. This card does not open the front door anymore. I said. But Silas said there is a legacy terminal in the basement. A hard line. Silas gave me a passphrase. I continued. Prometheus Unbound. Ben stared at the building. That place will be crawling with security. I know. I said that is why we are going to create a diversion. I pulled up the Dead Man Switch email on my phone. The one scheduled to send to the entire media list in 24 hours. I edited the subject line. Urgent bomb threat. Kestrel Ridge Capital. I did not send it to the media. I sent it to the internal security desk. They will evacuate the building. I said the fire protocols unlock the stairwell doors automatically. It is a safety feature. Ben's eyes went wide. Chloe. That is a felony. Calling in a fake bomb threat. That is federal prison time. I looked at him. Kidnapping is a felony. Ben. Money laundering is a felony. Stealing a man's life is a felony. I hit send. I am done playing by the employee handbook. I said. Drive. The knock on the door came at 6:15 in the morning. It was not a polite neighborly rap. It was a rhythmic authoritative pounding that shook the door frame. I was sitting at my kitchen island wearing the same clothes I had worn to the gala the night before. My makeup was smeared and my eyes felt like they had been scrubbed with sandpaper. I had not slept. I had spent the hour since leaving the Kestrel Ridge office staring at a thumb drive, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I opened the door. 2 uniformed police officers stood there. Behind them, wearing a trench coat that cost more than my car, was Kestrel Ridge's head of internal security. A man named Mr. Vance. Chloe Gonzalez. The officer asked. Yes. We have a warrant to search the premises and seize all electronic devices in relation to an investigation into corporate espionage and attempted extortion. He held up a piece of paper. I did not read it. I knew what it said. Mr. Vance stepped forward. He did not look angry. He looked bored. M. Gonzalez, he said, handing me a second envelope. You are also being served with a temporary restraining order filed by Graham Vale and Kestrel Ridge Capital. You are to remain 500 feet away from all company property and from Mr. Vale's residence. I stepped back to let them in. There was no point in fighting. I had anticipated this. My real laptop, the one with the data dump, was taped inside the air return vent in the hallway. The laptop sitting on my coffee table was a decoy. Wiped clean. Except for a few embarrassing high school photos and a resume. I watched them toss my apartment. They pulled books off shelves. They opened drawers. They bagged my decoy laptop and my old tablet. While they worked. My phone, which I had slipped into my waistband before opening the door, vibrated against my hip. It did not stop vibrating. When they finally left, leaving my apartment looking like a hurricane had passed through, I pulled out the phone. I opened the news app. The headline was already there. It was trending locally. Financial Aries accused of blackmailing stepfather in multi-million-dollar extortion plot. I clicked the link. The article was a masterpiece of character assassination. It cited anonymous sources close to the family who claimed that I had been suffering from mental health issues, that I had demanded $5 million to keep quiet about fabricated family secrets, and that I had threatened to release sensitive client data if I was not paid. It was a preemptive strike. They were not waiting for me to whistleblow. They were painting me as a criminal so that when I did speak, no one would believe me. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. I wanted to throw it across the room, but I answered. Chloe. Her voice was a ragged whisper. Did you see it? I asked. My voice was dead. The police are here. Chloe. She sobbed. They are interviewing Graham. He told them you threatened him at the gala. He told them you said you would ruin him if he did not pay you. I was there. Mom, I said you saw me. Did I ask for money? I do not know. She stammered. You whispered to him. I saw you whisper. I closed my eyes. Graham had spun the narrative so fast that even the eyewitnesses were rewriting their memories to fit his story. Mom. Listen to me, I said. Stop it. Chloe, she screamed. Just stop. Graham says he can fix this. He says if you issue a public apology if you admit you were off your medication, he will drop the charges. He will get you into a clinic. We can put this behind us. Clinic. I repeated. Please. She begged. I cannot handle this scandal. The neighbors are calling. The news vans are outside. Just make it go away. Apologize to him. Please. For me. I walked to the window. I looked out at the parking lot. An unmarked sedan was parked across the street. They were watching me. I cannot do that. Mom, I said. Why not? She wailed. Do you hate us that much? I do not hate you. I said. But I love the truth more. I hung up. I sank onto the floor. This was the part of the movie where the hero is supposed to feel righteous anger, where the music swells and they stand up ready to fight. I did not feel righteous. I felt dirty. My mother was right about one thing. This was not glamorous. Revenge is not a chess game played in tuxedos. It is ugly. It is paperwork. It is your mother crying on the phone because she is terrified of losing her country club membership. It is being framed for a crime you did not commit to cover up a crime they did commit. For a second. Just a second. I wavered. If I apologized, it would end. I could go to the clinic. I could sleep for a month. I could pretend none of this happened. Graham would win. But I would survive. My phone buzzed again. It was Sarah, the whistleblower attorney. Do not talk to anyone. I called her back. They raided me. I said. And the press is running the extortion angle. I know, Sarah said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through my self-pity. Listen to me. Chloe, this is the pivot point. They have fired their cannons. They have accused you of a felony. Extortion is serious. If you back down now, if you try to negotiate, you are admitting guilt. You will go to prison. But they have the narrative. I said. Narratives are soft. Sarah said. Evidence is hard. Did you get the logs last night? I looked at the vent where the laptop was hidden. I got something better. I said. I got the system architecture. But Sarah. The logs they are using to frame me. The article says they have proof I accessed the servers at 8:30 last night. 8:30? Sarah asked. Yes. Where were you at 8:30? I was in the ballroom. I said. Talking to Graham. Exactly. Sarah said. You have 300 witnesses and a digital recording of you being physically present at the gala. You could not have been logging into a secure terminal from your apartment at the same time. They faked the logs. I said. And they were sloppy about it. Sarah said they rushed it. They wanted to get the press release out before the markets opened. Chloe. This is good. If we can prove they manufactured evidence to frame a whistleblower, the SEC will tear them apart. I took a deep breath. Okay. I said. So, what do? We go nuclear. Sarah said. But you have to be sure. Once we send this package to the Department of Justice, there is no going back. You will be tied up in litigation for years. You will never work in finance again. I'm already never working in finance again. I said. I hung up. I went to the vent and unscrewed the cover with a dime. I pulled out the laptop. I booted it up. I needed to verify the timestamp on the fake logs the article mentioned. I logged into the external remote access portal, not the back door, but the public F-facing employee login page. I wanted to see if my account history was visible. It was locked. But then a chat window popped up on my screen. It was not an automated bot. System admin. We know you are there. Chloe. My heart hammered against my ribs. They were tracking my MAC address. System admin. You are making a mistake. I typed back. Who is this system admin? Look at the signatory on the Terra Irma accounts. I froze. I scrambled to open the folder where I had stored the screenshots from the first night. I zoomed in on the LLC documents. Authorized signatory A. Sterling. Arthur Sterling. He was the new CFO. The man who had been brought in 6 months ago to streamline operations. The man who had flagged my department for restructuring. I had thought he was just Graham's hatchet man. A suit hired to cut costs. But Terra Irma was the shell company washing the money. Arthur Sterling was not just the hatchet man. He was the architect. The chat window flashed again. A Sterling Graham is a useful idiot. He likes the lifestyle. But he doesn't understand the plumbing. I built the pipeline. You are trying to blow up a dam with a firecracker. Gonzalez. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. You framed me. I typed as Sterling. I managed risk. You were an anomaly in the data set. I tried to remove you gently. You refused to leave. Now I have to delete you. A Sterling. Did you save that homeless man to be a hero? Is that what this is? A crusade? A Sterling. You are not a hero. Chloe. You are just a thief who stole proprietary data. And by noon today, you will be in a cell. He was taunting me. He was so confident, so assured of his own brilliance that he could not resist rubbing it in. I looked at the screen. He was right about one thing. I was not a hero. Heroes fight for justice. I was fighting for something much more personal. I was fighting because they had looked at me and decided I did not matter. They had decided Silas did not matter. They had decided my mother was collateral damage. I closed the chat window. I opened my email client. I found the draft I had created 3 days ago. The dead man switch. It was addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the FBI Financial Crimes Division, and the editorial board of the New York Times. I clicked Attach File. I uploaded the raw data dump from the legacy terminal. I uploaded the hash files I had generated, proving the data had not been altered. I uploaded the photo of the burnt trust deed. I uploaded the audio file of Graham confessing at the gala. And then I added one more thing. I took a screenshot of the chat with Arthur Sterling. The timestamp was current. It showed him admitting to managing risk and calling Graham a useful idiot. It was a chain of custody that no lawyer could break. I stared at the send button. This was it. The moment I pressed this, I was burning down the house. My mother's reputation would be ruined. Graham would go to prison. Kestrel Ridge would likely collapse. I thought about the Thanksgiving dinner. The perfect turkey. The bishop's hat napkins. The silence that covered the rot. Arthur Sterling said I would end up a thief. Maybe he was right. I was about to steal their future. I clicked send. The progress bar moved across the screen. Sending 20%. Sending 50%. Sending 80%. Message sent. I sat back. The room was silent. I expected sirens. I expected the ceiling to cave in. But there was only the hum of the refrigerator. I walked into the kitchen. I looked at the table where I had eaten breakfast alone for 5 years. I thought about the Thanksgiving table at my mother's house. I realized now that the dinner had not been ruined by Silas knocking on the door. The dinner had been a corpse long before he arrived. We were just sitting around it, pretending it was alive. Silas had not destroyed our family. He had just peeled back the paint. I went to the fridge and took out a bottle of water. I drank it standing up. My phone rang. It was not my mother. It was not Sarah. It was Ben Chloe, he said. His voice was breathless. Check the stock ticker. I walked to the living room and turned on the TV. The chyron at the bottom of the financial news channel was bright red. Breaking news raids Kestrel Ridge Capital headquarters following whistleblower data dump. Trading halted on KRC shares. That happened fast. Faster than I thought possible. The automated trading algorithms, the ones Silas had built, must have reacted to the filing instantly, triggering a market freeze. I watched the footage. Agents and windbreakers were carrying boxes out of the glass tower I used to work in. I saw Graham being let out. He was not in handcuffs yet, but he looked small. He looked confused. He was looking around for a camera, for someone to charm. But the cameras were just recording his fall. And then I saw Arthur Sterling. He was not looking at the cameras. He was looking at his phone. He looked annoyed. I looked at my own phone. I had one new message from the unknown number. Well played. I turned off the TV. I walked back to the bedroom and began to pack a bag. Not to run away, but because I knew that in about an hour, the real police would be back. And this time, they wouldn't be coming to arrest me. They would be coming to take my statement. The dark night was over. I put on my coat. I checked my pocket for the iron key. It was still there. I was ready for the boardroom. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Kestrel Ridge Capital was colloquially known as the Glass Box. It was a space designed to intimidate with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Rockies, a view that usually costs $1,000 a minute to look at during billable hours. But today the view was ignored. The room was crowded. The long mahogany table was flanked by the board of directors, men and women in dark suits who looked like they were attending a funeral for their own portfolios. At the far end sat the independent auditors, looking pale. Next to them were representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission, their badges resting on the polished wood like loaded weapons. Graham Vale sat near the head of the table. He was not wearing his usual power suit. He was wearing a soft cardigan and a white shirt with no tie. He looked tired. He looked like a grieving father who had been dragged out of bed to deal with a delinquent child. It was a perfect costume. Arthur Sterling, the chief financial officer, sat opposite him. Sterling looked bored. He was checking his watch, tapping a manicured finger against the face of his phone. He exuded the confidence of a man who believed he had deleted the crime scene. I stood outside the double glass doors. My heart was not racing. My hands were not shaking. I felt a strange cold calm. I reached into my pocket and touched the heavy iron key. I pushed the doors open. Every head in the room turned. Graham stood up halfway. "Chloe," he said, his voice trembling with practiced concern. "You should not be here," the police said. "Sit down." "Graham," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a blade. Mr. Sterling let out a short, dismissive laugh. "This is the former employee in question, the one making the threats. Security. Please remove her." The federal agent in the corner raised a hand. "Let her speak. She is the one who sent us the data packet." I walked to the center of the room. I did not look at Graham. I looked at the board. "You received a narrative this morning," I said. "You were told that I am mentally unstable. You were told that I attempted to extort $5 million from my stepfather. You were told that the data breach was an act of vengeance by a fired employee." I reached into my bag. I pulled out a hard drive. I placed it on the table. It made a heavy solid sound. "That narrative was written by the man sitting right there," I said, pointing at Arthur Sterling. "And it was performed by the man sitting there, Graham Vale. But narratives do not hold up in court. Data does." I opened a folder on the table. I laid out the documents I had reconstructed. "Here is the original trust deed proving my status as the primary beneficiary of the class of voting shares," I said. "Here is the chain of custody for the server logs. And here is the metadata from the Kestrel Ridge security system." I slid a piece of paper toward the head of the audit committee. "This document shows a login to the secure admin terminal, using my credentials at 8:30 p.m. last night." I said, "That is the evidence used to justify the raid on my apartment." I slid a second photo across the table. "This is a time-stamped photograph of me at the Season of Thanks Gala at 8:30 p.m. last night shaking hands with the mayor. Unless I have the ability to be in two places at once." The logs were fabricated. The room went silent. The auditor picked up the photo. He looked at it. Then at Sterling. "Mr. Sterling?" the auditor asked. Sterling did not flinch. "It is a glitch," he said smoothly. "Or she gave her password to an accomplice. Proves nothing." I smiled. It was a cold smile. "I thought you might say that," I said. "So I brought something else." I pulled out the digital recorder. Colorado is a one-party consent state. I announced this recording was made last night in the ballroom of the Omni Hotel, during a private conversation between myself and Graham Vale. I pressed play. Graham's voice filled the room, amplified by the acoustics of the glass walls. "It is just a vehicle. A pipeline. We move capital from the investment side, run it through the nonprofit tax shield to clean it of certain liabilities, and then reinvest it as personal equity. It is how the game is played." Graham's face drained of color. He slumped back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The board members exchanged horrified looks. This was not just embezzlement. This was a confession to systemic tax fraud. But I was not done. I let the recording play on, and Silas, my voice on the tape, asked, "I solved the problem." Graham's voice replied, "Just like I solved the problem this morning. Let us just say Mr. Mercer is on a very long bus ride." I stopped the tape. I looked at Sterling. He was no longer tapping his watch. He was staring at Graham with pure unadulterated hatred. Graham looked around the room, panic rising in his eyes. He realized the room had turned. "I was protecting the firm," Graham stammered. "I was managing a difficult situation. Silas Mercer was a threat. He was insane. He was going to leak false information that would have crashed the stock. I had to contain him." "Then why did you forge his resignation?" a voice asked from the doorway. Everyone turned. Silas Mercer stood there. He was not wearing the ragged coat. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. His beard was trimmed. He looked frail, yet But he stood tall, leaning on a cane. Flanking him were two lawyers from the firm of Patterson and Finch. Silas walked into the room. He did not look at the board. He walked straight to the empty chair at the head of the table, the founder's chair, and sat down. "Hello." "Graham," Silas said. Graham looked like he was seeing a ghost. "Impossible," he whispered. "You are gone." "I missed the bus," Silas said simply. Silas placed a single sheet of paper on the table. "This is the document that removed me from the company 10 years ago," Silas said to the room. "It bears a signature that purports to be mine. It was used to freeze my assets and transfer my voting rights to Graham Vale." Silas pointed a finger at Arthur Sterling. However, forensic analysis of the digital watermark on this document shows it was created on a workstation registered to the legal compliance team. Specifically, the workstation of one Arthur Sterling, who was then a junior counsel. Sterling's composure cracked. He stood up. "This is ridiculous," Sterling snapped. "I was following orders. Graham Vale was the acting CEO. He instructed me to draft the paperwork. He told me Mercer had agreed to the terms." "Liar." Graham shrieked. He jumped to his feet, knocking his chair over. "You told me it was legal. You told me you found a loophole. You said if we cut him out, we could double our margins. I did not tell you to steal $3.8 million through a charity account." Sterling shouted back. "That was your sloppy mess, Graham. I told you to keep it clean. I built the pipeline you asked for." Graham yelled, his face purple. "You are the one who wrote the code. You are the one who deleted the logs." The two men were screaming at each other now, their voices bouncing off the glass walls. It was a symphony of self-destruction. They were tearing each other apart, confessing to crimes, pointing fingers, unraveling a decade of lies in less than 60 seconds. I watched them. I felt a profound sense of detachment. This was the revenge. Not the jail time. Not the fines. It was this moment right here. The moment where the honor among thieves evaporated, and they showed the world exactly who they were. The federal agent stepped forward. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice booming. "That is enough." He signaled to his team. "Graham Vale, Arthur Sterling, you are both under arrest." The room erupted into chaos. Security moved in. Graham tried to protest, tried to fix his cardigan, tried to maintain some shred of dignity, but the handcuffs clicked shut. Sterling went quietly, but his eyes were burning holes into Graham's back. The independent auditor cleared his throat. "Given the evidence provided by Ms. Gonzalez and Mr. Mercer," he announced, "we are unfreezing the assets related to the trust immediately. We are also initiating a full forensic audit of the Thanksgiving Fund." The chairman of the board looked at Silas. "Mr. Mercer," he said, his voice shaking slightly. We had no idea. We were told you had resigned for health reasons." Silas looked at the chairman. "Willful ignorance is not a defense," Silas said quietly. "But we can discuss your resignation later. Right now, I believe you have a company to save." He looked at me. He nodded. I turned and walked out of the glass box. The hallway was quiet. The chaos was contained behind the soundproof glass. My mother was sitting on a bench near the elevators. She had been waiting there the whole time. She stood up when she saw me. She looked small. Her expensive coat looked too big for her. She had been crying. But her eyes were dry now. I saw them take him. She whispered. I nodded. "It is over." "Mom." She looked at me. She searched my face, looking for the daughter she had raised. The daughter who folded napkins. The daughter who kept the peace. But that daughter was gone. "You ruined us," she said. Her voice was flat. There was no anger in it. Just a terrible empty realization. We have nothing. Chloe. The house. The accounts. It will all be seized. We are going to be on the street. You are not going to be on the street. I said. Silas is a fair man. He will not let you starve. But the party is over. Mom, the lie is over. Mom shook her head. I just wanted to be safe, she said. I know, I said. And that is why I could not save you. I stepped closer to her. You had a choice. Mom. 10 years ago. You saw the email. You knew what he was. You could have walked away then. We would have been poor. But we would have been free. I took a deep breath. You chose comfort, I said. I chose the truth. I pressed the button for the elevator. Mom did not move. She stood there watching me for the first time. She looked at me with something like respect. Or maybe it was fear. I could not tell the difference anymore. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. As the doors closed, cutting off the view of my mother in the glass tower, I closed my eyes. I thought about the doorbell ringing on Thanksgiving. I thought about the cold wind rushing into the warm house. I thought about how annoyed I had been. How I just wanted the dinner to be perfect. I realized then that the doorbell had not been an interruption. It had been an invitation. Silas had knocked on the door to offer us a choice. Graham chose to close the door. My mother chose to hide behind it. I was the only one who walked through it. The elevator dinged. Lobby level. I walked out into the bright, cold sunlight of the Denver afternoon. The air tasted clean. Tasted like winter. I did not know what I would do next. I did not know if I would keep the shares or sell them. I did not know if I would ever work in an office again. But as I walked down the street, merging into the crowd of people rushing to their own lives, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the girl holding the carving knife, waiting for permission to eat. I was the one who held the key. And for the first time in 10 years, I was not afraid of what was behind the door. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So, please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Chloe's decision. If you enjoyed this ride, please subscribe to the HOA Karen Vlog channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.